Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahe Tejasvina Vadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May we be nurtured together, may we be nourished together, may we strive together, may our learning shine, may we not quarrel. Peace. Let's bring us up to date structurally where we're at in our course. So that the way this teaching goes is, if you've known or noticed so far, is I will first begin with the basics, and then I will include an advanced part in the middle. And then I'll switch back to the basics, and then it's going to be even more advanced next time. And then the basics, and then even more advanced next time. And then the basics, and then even more advanced. This is to sort of bring a contrast and not to overload us with just the basics or just the advanced. So I kind of mix it in between. So the reason I'm saying this is for the new guys, is that right now we're in a somewhat advanced part, and the advanced part that we're discussing is the Pancha Kosha, the 5 koshas, the 5 layers or sheaths which cover consciousness, that is, which cover the identity of the true I, which is preventing an individual, that is a jiva, from identifying themselves as to who they really are. Now, this teaching's purpose is to learn, first of all, what the 5 Pancha Koshas are. And then by knowing what they are, only then can we negate them, as that is to know that they are not I, called anatma. So that is, it's not just about negating. We first have to know negate what. And in order to ask negate what, we first have to fully comprehend what is it that we're negating and why are we negating it. And the reason why we're negating it is anything born comes, at least human being speaking, comes with these 5 layers. That means any human being has these 5 Pancha Kosha, and each one of them has a certain function which a person, that is you, is identified with. So that means we have to know what each of these layers, these Pancha Koshas are, in order not to mistaken identifying the I onto the function of the kosha. You understand? So, for example, let's say, taking the very basic annamaya kosha, the food sheath. Now, why do we call the food sheath your physical body? Very simple, because your physical body, if you think about it, is created in the womb, and it's created by the food that the mother eats. Then it is sustained by the food while it's alive, and not only that, but it goes back to food when it physically dies. So therefore, annamaya kosha is that first sheath that we are going to start with. So in terms of viveka, Pancha Kosha viveka, that is the 5 sheath discrimination, in terms of using that, we simply say, well, I cannot be the food sheath, because let's face it, question, let's say a person is really fat, and they got a huge belly, and they call themselves I, and they mistaken that I for the body. Now, let's say they go to get a surgical incision, and they take out, let's say, 5 kilograms of fat. Now, there's 5 kilograms of fat on a dish, and a person wakes up. Could they say that fat on the dish is now I? So then why do they say I, which included that fat just 2 hours ago before they got the surgery? So it becomes pretty obvious that you cannot be your Pancha Kosha, your food sheath, your annamaya kosha. Because even if you think about it, what happens if we all unconsciously say the word my. Did you notice that? My arm, my mind, my thoughts, my worries, my clarity. Did you ever notice that? We all unconsciously are giving away the fact that we're not our thoughts, we're not our minds, we're not our whatever follows the word my. Because the my is a pronoun. And the pronoun qualifies the object. The object being the thought, the mind, the whatever experience it is. So that means the qualifying pronoun cannot be the object because it's qualifying the object. Hello, sir. Yeah. Just mind the camera, yeah. Okay, very good. What's your name?
Arun.
Arun. Welcome. Namo Namaha. Okay, so now let's just go to a basic revision of what these koshas are, if we've already... Okay, so in the center, as we described, is consciousness. Now, consciousness is the most... See, the more we go inwards, the more pervasive it gets. So that means Om, that is a sign for consciousness, Atman, or Brahman. It's all synonymous words. It pervades all 5 koshas, all 5 of them. Now, as we go one level out, that is the bliss sheath, that is the causal body, or the anandamaya kosha, the causal body, it pervades the outer intellectual, mental, vital air and food. But it cannot pervade Om. And we go more, next level, we go intellectual sheath. It pervades the mental, the vital air and food, but it cannot pervade the bliss and the Om. As we go one level in, we go mental sheath, which pervades the vital air and the food sheath, but it cannot pervade the intellectual, bliss and Om. As we go one level next, we go to vital air. It can pervade the food sheath, but it cannot pervade mental, intellectual, bliss and Om, consciousness. So that's what it means, that the more we go inwards, the more pervasive it becomes. So that means consciousness is what is the most pervasive. Consciousness can pervade anything, but even the bliss sheath or these layers cannot pervade consciousness. We clear so far? Okay. So, for example, also last week I made a confusion. I'm going to correct that. To which body does Pranamaya belong to? Now that was my mistake. My teacher, one of my teachers said it's between the subtle and the gross. But we'll just put it as it's actually the subtle body. So the Pranamaya Kosha is the subtle body. The reason is, okay, the question is why? Why is Pranamaya Kosha the subtle body and not the gross body? Remember, the gross body is physical, but Pranamaya is your circulation, digestion, expulsion, reversal. Why is that subtle body? Because we cannot see those. They are the functions which cause the digestion. It's not the digestion itself. It's not the breathing itself. It's the function because of which the breathing is possible. It's the function because of which the digestion is possible. So that means the actual organs, small intestine, large intestine, that is actually a gross manifestation, that's actually a gross product. But the functioning of that gross product is made possible by the prana. So on the outside we see there is a blood flow, there is respiration, but all of that is caused by the pranayama. By the vital air sheath. Okay? Okay, so we covered that briefly last week about pervasiveness. So now let's get to know each one of these koshas so that we can then at the end see what to negate. So annamaya kosha, food sheath. Everyone repeat after me. Annamaya kosha, food sheath. Annamaya kosha. Okay. Vital air sheath, Pranamaya Kosha. Okay. Mental sheath, Manomaya Kosha. Okay, very good. Intellectual sheath, Vijnanamaya Kosha. Very good. And bliss sheath, Anandamaya Kosha. Okay, so now let's talk about each one of them. The food sheath. As I've said, it's your physical body which arises from food. It is sustained by food, and even when it goes back to the ground, it's going to become food for earth or food for worms. Is that hard to... I think it's very easy to understand, actually. So there is no problem when it comes to physical body. It's the easiest to understand because it is so visible and we can see it, and it's with us every time we open our eyes or feel any pain. Okay, now we go on to the vital air sheath, Pranamaya Kosha. So the Pranamaya Kosha has 5 physiological functions. So now we're talking about the Pranamaya Kosha. Okay? That's the second inner circle. This is where we're at now. Vital air, that's the Pranamaya Kosha. The Pranamaya Kosha has Pancha prana. Pancha just means in Sanskrit 5. It has 5 physiological functions. And the Pranamaya Kosha affects the food sheath. In other words, it pervades the food sheath. This is very easily seen with premature aging because the health condition of the prana directly affects the body's outer look and beauty. So if someone has, for example, wrinkles and, just look super old and super fast, then that is a direct proportion to the health of their prana. For example, you've seen those before and after photos of meth users, when they just look like totally healthy, and then after 1 year of drug use or alcohol, they're just like still face, they're just totally, they're not smiling, like passport photo, but there's just kind of destruction about it. So that's because these substances interfere with these 5 pancha pranas, these internal physiological functions, and it is manifested then as a direct expression on the outer body. Okay. And also what happens is the older a body gets, the less functioning are these pancha pranas, these 5 physiological functions, which is why sometimes old people, if they haven't been taking care of themselves, will prefer or depend on medicine in order to kickstart or to boost one of these pranas, these physiological functions, so that the body can keep going. Because if the prana is not working, then how is the mind supposed to think? Because the mind needs the brain. So in other words, the prana, direct correlation of health of prana equals direct correlation of the mental and vijnana, maya, intellectual sheath. See how it's all connected? Yeah. So also qigong or healing modalities like tai chi chuan or even acupuncture will deal with energy, these 5 pranas, or even Ayurveda will also deal with one of these 5 pranas to rebalance them back into harmony. And so you can see sometimes after a long treatment, they will come out of this center and they're just sparkling, just totally bright. Their skin is smooth, they're just feeling really good, just because these pranas have been realigned back to how they're supposed to be functioning. Okay, so now the question is, what are these 5 pancha pranas? The first one is respiration. This is simply breathing, inhalation and exhalation. Now we're not talking about your lungs. Why? Because lungs belong to what kosha? Food kosha, that's right, it's the annamaya kosha. So that's a physical. But what the process which moves the organ of the lungs, the process which moves the circulation of the body, that process is what the prana is. So in this case, the process of moving the lungs, giving the lungs the function to breathe, is respiration, prana. The next is excretion. So excretion is body waste, like even sweating, and also evacuation when we go to the bathroom, and also rejection of certain poisonous, toxic substances which we ingest. So this prana is there to help us to expel those substances which are no longer useful, which have been processed by the body, and they have to be now expelled. So if we take just excretion out, you know, the whole system, the whole body falls apart. Because see how they're all necessary? Yeah. Okay, so the next one, that's apana, excretion. You don't have to know the Sanskrit word, we just put it in there for extra information. The next pancha prana, one of the pancha pranas, is circulation. This is vyana and circulation of the blood in the body, which nourishes or causes or gives nourishment to red blood cells, white blood cells, to different organs, the spleen, the kidneys, the lungs, the heart. So circulation is caused by this prana. Take this prana out, the whole system falls apart. Okay. The next one we can also call reverse process. Here we call it expulsion, but we can just use reverse process. This is a very interesting one because its function is to let the person both vomit, but also to burp. So whenever there's a burping, then that's actually making use of expulsion, or this fourth prana, which is the reverse process, but also vomiting. So taking something poisonous or something that the body instantly rejects, then this prana is going to kick right in and help the body to keep it alive. And also at the time of death, this prana is the one that's going to detach the subtle body, your subtle body, that means your mind, your intellect, and your ego, the ahankara, from the gross body. And that, taking this process out, then the whole system falls apart once again. So you can see how beautifully this is created. Each one of them serves a certain purpose. We all know what a subtle body is. The subtle body is between these two lines. Okay, that's just your mind, intellect, and ego, where all experience happens. You can just call it your mind. Now the next one is digestion, samana, and this is for the assimilation of foods and liquids. So the only reason why the body successfully processes the liquids and the foods is because this prana is fully operational. And we know now that as the body ages, you'll see very common the health issues that occur, and the kind of medications that are on offer, they all prescribe to cater to one of these 5 pranas, also to the physical body, but usually the physical body is an expression of the malfunctioning of one of these 5 pranas. You can have digestion problems, so there's a prescription to cure that. We could have circulation problem, high blood pressure, low blood pressure, incorrect prana alignment. So we have medication for that. But of course, we don't want to get to that place because, the whole point is to take care of the body in order to, just have a good time, especially when the body gets older. Okay, so now we have so far talked about the food sheath and the vital air sheath. That is the physical body and the prana, or the energy which operates the circulation, digestion, excretion, expulsion, and so on within the physical body. Okay. Now, moving on, we have the mental and intellectual sheath, the annamaya and the vijnanamaya kosha. We will discuss the difference, what's the difference between the mind and the intellect in more detail, and it's going to be next section up. This is where, see the intellect? The intellect controls the mind. And the mind, in turn, controls the prana, and the prana, in turn, controls the physical body. For example, when we hear bad news, like something really bad happened, something, family member injured, or something just terrible, what happens? The mind receives that input through the 5 organs of perception, or 5 organs of knowledge, ears, eyes, and so on. And then that information then gets what? It gets passed to the prana, and then the prana, by its functioning, there's an expression of the physical body into a very depressive state, into a sorrowful state, into a state where you just cannot think. We've all had an experience like this. First the mind, and then you feel like the throat tightens up, the chest closes, the stomach starts to show. All of these pranas being controlled by what? The mind. And then the physical body has a natural contracting on the outside. You see how it's all connected? Okay. So that's just a nice order here. The vijnana maya kosha, the intellect controls the mind controls the vital air, the prana, and the vital air prana, of course, controls the final product, which we see in the real world, which is our outside body. Very simple. Okay, now the bliss sheath. Now the bliss sheath is, who can remember what the bliss sheath name is? Sanskrit name? Long A, anandamaya kosha. Okay. So the bliss sheath is between these two lines. That's the causal body, or the bliss sheath. So now let's talk about what is the bliss sheath. Okay, so it's a state where, okay, so how do you experience the bliss sheath? You cannot experience the bliss sheath. Or maybe you can. Because the bliss sheath is nothing but your tendencies. But you're not directly experiencing your unmanifest tendencies, are you? Because how do you know what unmanifest tendencies you have until they actually show up? Because that's what the bliss sheath is. They are those tendencies which are yet to be fructified. So how do you experience something if it hasn't been fructified in the now? You can't. But at the same time you do, because you're never not acting. And what is an action? An action is nothing but vasana, that is your bliss sheath, passing the tendency to the intellect, passing that to the mind, passing to the vital air, passing to the final physical product, which is your body. So that means yes and no. That's the point. You do experience your vasanas in the moment, but you do not experience your vasanas while they remain unmanifest. It's only when a situation arises do we know how we actually respond to that situation. But until it arises, we have no idea how it responds. And how we respond to a situation is the bliss sheath, is the anandamaya kosha. Are we clear on that? So summary, bliss sheath, yes?
Why is it called bliss then? It doesn't seem to have a relationship with bliss.
Yeah, I'll get to that now. Okay. So in summary, the bliss sheath, or the tendency, that's what vasana means, the tendency, both unmanifest and manifest in the now, is the bliss sheath. Now, why do we call it the bliss sheath? Now let's go back to the beginning when I said, do you ever experience the bliss sheath? Your tendencies? You do in the now. But do you really? Because you're only experiencing part of it, not the whole. So it's a tricky question, yes and no. You see, even the way you shake your head, how you shake your head is dependent on the bliss sheath, because that's your tendency. Some people shake their heads, like in India, they will turn their heads around. In the West, we go like this. Even that is determined by how you do the head shaking, which is what? Your tendency to shake your head. So how do you really know if you're experiencing your bliss sheath? Impossible. Because everything, even the way you think, is also governed by the bliss sheath, the tendency to think. You are nothing but an expression of the tendency to be the way you are as a person. So let me put it this way. Can you be aware of your thoughts? Can you be aware of your body? Okay, can you be aware of a thought which hasn't yet manifested?
No.
Can you be aware of that principle because of which makes you the way you are as a person? The unconscious. No, it's beyond you because you are a product of the unconscious. Anandamaya kosha, bliss sheath. So, when we are in deep sleep, what's there in deep sleep? What's your experience? What exactly? Our experience in deep sleep is nothing to be aware of. There's nothing you could say. There's just no principle in deep sleep to reflect the bliss or the experience of deep sleep. Why? Because the subtle body is the reflecting medium which reflects the experience that is occurring in the moment. And that subtle body recedes in deep sleep, so there is no reflecting medium, there is no memory, there is no intellect, there is no mind to discriminate or to remember deep sleep. That's why you say, there's nothing to say about deep sleep. You're right, because even the ego is not in deep sleep. Even that receded, so there's no person to either experience the higher reality, the self, or the lower reality that is mithya, the physical. There is nobody there to discriminate because the intellect's gone. There is no one there to feel because the mind is the feeler of emotions. That's gone. And there is no I, the ego, to own the experience. That means in deep sleep, when the causal body, the anandamaya, is operating, there is nothing other than what's your experience of deep sleep?
Yes.
Bliss. Does that answer your question? And now, why does it feel blissful? That's the next question. Why does anandamaya kosha feel blissful? Because we all agree inherently, see, we don't go to sleep to dream. We will lose our minds. We go to sleep specifically to sleep, that state of nothingness. Why do we want to sleep? Yeah, bliss. Why is it blissful? What do we say about the subtle body? Gone. That means all experience is gone in deep sleep. No object, nothing. And that's what makes it so blissful. As soon as the subtle body upon waking or in the dream comes back, guess what? There's experience. The mind starts to get agitated, covering the bliss. So, therefore, deep sleep is a state where everything is... in deep sleep, there is no knowledge nor ignorance. Do you agree with that? You cannot say, I am ignorant in deep sleep. And you cannot also say, I know that this is deep sleep. You can only say that later upon waking. But in deep sleep, there is nobody there to say anything. There is nobody there to own anything. There is nobody there to think anything or feel anything. Because the subtle body, the mind, the intellect and the ego is not there. There is nobody there to say anything or to remember anything. And yet, how do we know that deep sleep is blissful if there's nobody, if the subtle body is gone? Isn't that weird? We all know it's blissful, but there's nobody there in deep sleep to know or remember that it's blissful.
When you feel refreshed, is that something the body does, or the cleanness about it?
Well, you don't have a body in deep sleep. You see, you can only infer that in the waking, but you don't have a body in deep sleep. There's nobody there to say, I don't have a body. So then how is it, the thing about it is, how is it in deep sleep, if there's nobody there to remember that it's actually blissful, to know that it's blissful, and yet here we are in the waking state, all agreeing that deep sleep is blissful. How is that possible? Because we all agree deep sleep is nothing. So that means that some principle has to survive the deep sleep. And that same principle which survives the deep sleep has to continue and still be present in the waking in order to tell successfully and report successfully that deep sleep indeed was blissful. What is that principle that survives deep sleep?
Consciousness.
As he said, awareness, consciousness, the inner circle, the Om, which is most pervasive. What do we say about the more we go inwards? It pervades the outer circles, including the causal body. Do you understand now why you know that there is bliss in sleep? And what is in sleep? Nothing but the causal body. Nothing but potential tendencies. And yet in the waking we know it's blissful. That has to prove then consciousness, consciousness pervade even deep sleep. Otherwise, you'd be telling me, what are you talking about? I've never heard of deep sleep. There's no such thing. But we all know there's deep sleep. That means deep sleep exists. We all know it exists. How? Because we all survive deep sleep. When I say we, I mean consciousness, Atman, you. Okay. Clear?
So there's obviously a big distinction between deep sleep and dream state.
There is, very big.
Yeah.
Okay, dream, okay. So deep sleep, there is no subtle body. In a dream state, is there physical body in your dream? In the dream, not from the waking state, in the dream.
Are you aware of the physical body in the dream state?
Okay, let's put it that way. Are you?
Yeah.
See, there's hesitation. I mean, there's hesitation. If I just ask you, are you aware of your physical body right now?
Yeah.
Instant. Are you aware of your physical body in dream? See, you can only say that from the waking state. But in the dream, can you say there is now a body lying, a physical body lying in bed that is now producing this dream? Can you say that? Impossible. So what's the difference between dream and deep sleep? In deep sleep, there is no subtle body and there is no physical body. We all agree with that. In the dream state, there is no physical body, but there is the subtle body. Why do you think your dreams are personal to you? You don't dream somebody else's story, do you? You always dream something that is relatable to your own life. Isn't that true? Because that means you take with you what is still present in this waking state. What is present in this waking state is called the subtle body. That subtle body is taken to the dreamer, which is why you see your family, your common members, your common life experiences. Now the question is, then why is a dream so fluid? Why can I fly in a dream? Why can I not get killed in a dream? Yeah, because you're not limited by the 5 organs of action, 5 organs of knowledge, perception. As soon as the physical body comes and the 5 organs of perception, eyes, ears, nose, so on, instantly what happens is it categorizes or fixates or creates solidity about reality. That's why everything is so solid here in this waking state. As soon as you take away the body, instantly this same room can now be fluid. You can walk through the wall, you can do whatever you want. Same thing happens with people who go through psychedelics. They drink a certain potion of whatever it is, and then suddenly they close their eyes, and they can be aware of their physical body also in this kind of state. And suddenly they can go anywhere. They can go to different worlds, they can travel, they can fly, they can come back, or they can open their eyes and they get their physical body. You see? So what's the difference? Dream state, no physical body, but your subtle body is present. Deep sleep, no physical body and no subtle body. That's why there's nothing. What is a subtle body? That faculty because of which experience is possible. Think about it. Without your mind, without your intellect, experience is impossible. Who's there to know anything unless your mind is working? That mind is absent in deep sleep. Hence no experience. So we're clear now what of these 3. By the way, we're going to get much deeper next session about these 3 states and why do we identify with the physical, subtle, and the causal. So the whole session is about negating. That's where this is all going. This is not about just learning, but about negating who I, consciousness, am not. Okay. So, we're still talking about the anandamaya kosha, or the causal body. Don't worry, we're going to get through the three bodies in the next section in a lot of detail. So, in the deep sleep, think about it this way. Let's say you're a king who owns land and has got queens and got princesses and got a castle. Is that king a king in deep sleep? Okay, now we take a person who is, let's say they don't have money, they're poor, they're on the streets. They're not a bad person, that's the life they chose. Is that person, whatever name you want to assign to that, let's say a homeless, a hobo, I think that's the word. Is that hobo a hobo in deep sleep? So that means a king and a hobo are equal in deep sleep. Because there's nobody there to identify with who they are, to identify with their subtle body. I am a king, I am homeless. That principle, which happens in a subtle body, is not there. So they're equal. It's only when the subtle body comes does the conditioning or awareness of conditioning is able to reflect and go, I am a king, I am rich, I am important, I am a man, I am a woman, I am so on. I am all of these attributes. You take that away, you are exactly the same as a sleeping dog or a cat or a tiger. Yeah. So what happens is, while the person is awake, when we're awake, or even in the dream, because the subtle body is operating, there's agitation. See, one single thought that comes into and gets reflected on the subtle body, remember this is pure sattva. Subtle body is pure reflective sattva, reflecting medium. It's like a pure mirror. Just imagine a subtle body like a pure reflecting mirror. As soon as you have a thought hit that mirror, there's agitation. That's why people love meditation, because there is no thoughts hitting the mirror. So they get addicted to their meditation. But they don't realize that as soon as they get out of meditation, hey, you got to have a whole bunch of thoughts continuing to hit that mirror. So, when in the waking state, this waking state and the dream state, while there is a subtle body operating, that means a reflecting mirror, there are thoughts. Therefore, there is agitation. That's why we want to go to deep sleep, to get a break from this agitation. So there's just nothing. It's no coincidence we all want deep sleep. Find me one person who gets high on drugs, let's say MDMA or whatever it is, and they have the super ultimate joy of their life. What do they all eventually say? Or after getting along the night of drinking? I want to go to sleep. That means even the joy of the greatest bliss that a person can get injected into their body and the mind, intellect, they still inherently understand, I am actually, my nature is freedom from experience. Freedom from objects. Because that's what an experience is. Even a person high on drugs, they're having an experience of joy. They even want to be free of the joy. That means consciousness is not even joy. Consciousness is not even bliss. Because that's adding an attribute to consciousness. Consciousness is awareness of the bliss, awareness of the joy. Understand? Big distinction. So why does a person like that, high on, they're drunk, they're having a good time, why do they eventually want to go to sleep? Why don't you just say, this is would not, if that state is better, would that not imply they want to stay in that state and have another hit? No, they don't. They want to ultimately go back to sleep. Inherently understanding, every human inherently understands, my nature is freedom from experience. And there is no greater bliss than disidentifying with experience. That's what moksha means. I said from session 1, Moksha is freedom from experience. We're not saying experience doesn't happen. We're saying there's a disidentification of experience. That experience is happening to this body, but it's not happening to me. You understand? So what is a samsari? A samsari is one where experience happens in the mind, in the subtle body, and the I, which is also in the subtle body, the ahankara, the owner of the experience, that entity which owns the experience, that is also mistaken to be I. So that means whatever experience happens to the subtle body, or in the subtle body, to a samsari, to an ignorant person, that is happening to me. So what do they go and do? They try to get rid of that. Through substances, through dating, through desiring objects, through wealth, through your trophy wife. Why? Because it temporarily suspends their agitations. But how long does that last? Not very long at all. It works, but very temporarily. Until the agitations come back, and then, we're back into the rat race of chasing more objects. So that means a person is not looking for objects. Inherently, we're looking for freedom from desire. Why? Because desire covers the mind. And we want to be free of that because we inherently understand my nature is freedom. My nature is freedom from experience. And I cannot stand this experience of desire. So then I go into the world and I chase it to at least get a temporary relief of it. But it doesn't last. Okay, so let's do a little experiment. How do we put this into real life practice of what we just learned?
Get some good sleep. I was just thinking as you're talking about the sleep thing, most medical or healing models always recommend, it's at the core of their modality, if you like, about sleep, the role of sleep.
Yeah.
But what's unacknowledged is what you're outlining here is like it's awareness that it's the dropping of the mind that is the healing aspect.
That's right.
So when they recommend get some sleep, they're probably not fully in the picture about what it's actually doing.
That's right.
They're just following what other people have said, other teaching, but there's not really the insight into what actually sleep functions as for the human. Yeah.
It would be so useful just knowing this for I can just imagine for those kind of people what actually happens behind the scenes when there's sleep and there's no agitation of the mind. Right. So then the equipment, the body is able to heal. That's why sleep is so healing, because there's no agitation of the mind. So there's total rest. That's why those in meditation, they're super healthy. Those who are just living a sattvic, pure life without too much experience on the outside. They're just healthy all the time. Why? Because the mind's not agitated. So the body gets to replenish itself constantly. Yeah. Okay, so. Ow. That hurts. Annamaya kosha, not I. Oh, my digestion is a little shaky today. Which kosha is that? Pranamaya kosha, not I. Oh, I'm feeling sorrow. I'm feeling fuzziness. I don't understand what's being taught here. I feel small. Which kosha is that? Feeling. Maya kosha, good. Not I. I have no idea what he's talking about. This is not making sense. This is totally ludicrous. This doesn't work. What kosha is that? There's thoughts there. Annamaya kosha. Not I. Causal body, bliss, Deep sleep, not I. Understand? Can anyone give me another example of one of these? Choose one kosha of one of these 5 and give me an example. Just for practice.
Craving a kind of food.
Excellent. What kosha is that?
I call the food sheath.
Food sheath. Excellent. Annamaya kosha. Not I. That's called Pancha Kosha, 5 kosha viveka, discrimination. Pancha Kosha viveka. In other words, we're discriminating whatever is going on in these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sheaths and simply identifying that is occurring within the range of that sheath, not I. Thoughts of confusion, annamaya kosha, not I. Feelings of joy, extreme ecstasy, not I. Understand? It's kind of like neti. Not this, not this, not this, not this.
Does that model imply that you've got 5 layers at which you can address a food craving, each one more powerful than the last? Do the 5 layers work that way? Let's say your air is more powerful and it pervades, that you can breathe through those sort of things, or is that...
So in context of food craving,
yes.
See, food craving is also going to be obviously a tendency. Isn't that, I mean, you got to ask, where is this tendency to crave food coming from? Bliss sheath, causal body. Causal body means tendency. See how it penetrates all the way, and then we have a physical response of craving coming all the way from where? The causal body. That means the causal body is, as I said from the beginning, that which causes you to be the way you are as a person. A jiva, a person in this life. That's why you cannot ever know the causal body. Because even trying to know the causal body is also modified by the causal body. You can only discount that as not I. That's the point of the teaching. Alright, so now, as I said, let's discriminate between mind and intellect. This is going to help us a little bit more because we're often going to hear these words interchangeably, mind, intellect. Ultimately, just to be clear, ultimately they're one and the same. Because there's no such thing as separation here. There's no such thing as first the feeling and then the thought, or the thought and then the feeling. It's all now, instant. See, because reality is Advaita. It's not compartmentalized into parts. It's just all together. But for the sake of understanding, we break it down into sort of categories, and then it helps you understand. And then you can remove those categories, and then things make a lot more sense. Okay, so let's do a comparative study of mind and intellect. But before we do, I want to show you the process of... Remember how I said the intellect modifies, controls the mind controls the prana, and prana controls the physical body? So now let's see what happens in real life if all of us now go to that hot stove and put our hands on the hot stove. Let's see what happens in the context of these 5 koshas. Step 1, we're crazy enough to put our finger on the hot stove. Now, the skin, through one of the 5 organs of knowledge or perception, carries that signal, obviously, like any signals carried, to where? To the mind. That's why the mind's over here. First, the organs of perception carries it to the mind. The mind, what happens is that the mind, what's the job of the mind? The job of the mind is to take all of this sense data that's coming through your ears and skin at any moment and actually create a proper, you could call it a arrangement to give order and sense to reality. So that you don't feel joy and anger at the same time. Do you ever feel that at the same time? No. So in other words, the mind's job is to create a proper order of your experience right now. Also, you've heard, if you know NLP, the mind gets 7 plus minus 2 bits of information. It converts it despite the fact that we have billions of bits of information coming in through our senses. And then we're only processing 7 plus minus 2 bits of info at any one moment. So that's another way to put it in a scientific basis, but we're going to stick with Vedanta and just simply say that the mind's job is to make sense of your experience, to put it into, you could say, categories, right? Okay. Now, it then consults, because at that point, nothing happens. Now the mind needs to ask someone, what does this mean? What does it mean when there is a temperature of 300 degrees on the finger? What does that mean? Mind's job is to feel that, to organize that as an experience, but it needs to consult somebody. It consults the intellect, that's why there's an arrow going into the intellect, and now the intellect needs to what? It needs to consult something else. It needs to consult memory. How have I reacted to this before? I know there's Vasana there, I'll explain that. The intellect consults the memory. If in the past I have moved my hand, then it's safe that since this temperature matches a temperature done in the past, then it's safe to tell the mind to command the organs of action to move away the hand. You understand? So, intellect consults memory. Memory is extracted from a previous experience, and it tells it back to the intellect. Intellect then being the viveka function, the discriminating, the judging fact, the analysis, the evaluating function. It evaluates that experience by the help of the memory and tells the mind, for the sake of the individual, activate those muscles in the hand in order for the hand to go back. Okay, so that means it goes back to the mind, and then the mind sends it to the organs of action. Organs of action means your speech, your hands, your sex organs, your feet, and your anus. Those are the only 5 organs of action there are. And they're controlled by the mind. The mind consults the intellect. The intellect consults the memory. How this entire experience gets experienced is controlled by the vasana. Because there are some people who move their hand to the left, there are some people who put their hand straight up. Both come from memory, but the tendency of how to move comes from the vasana. You understand the difference? Vasana is tendency how. Okay, so now, and then the mind consults commands the muscles to move, and then the hand goes. So we're just analyzing the experience of what happens every moment, even now, with listening. Now let's do an analogy of the mind versus the intellect. The mind versus the intellect. The mind, if you were to imagine, is like a clerk in office. Just a person sitting in an office and is receiving papers. The papers being an analogy for sense data. You understand? Feelings, emotions, sights, a tiger, a friend, all of those are papers. In other words, input of the external world. All of those are papers provided to by the mind being the clerk in office. Now the mind at this point doesn't know what to do, because the clerk, who is now receiving piles of, has to call somebody, has to say, what do I do with this envelope? To which body part do I, send this to? What do I do with this information? Then that clerk has to contact the officer in charge, and who is then going to order which or where does this mail received go. In other words, how is it to where? How is it processed? Does for example, when let's say the paper of sense input is a very angry dog, like one of those back streets you find yourself alone. Now that's a paper received by the clerk in office. The clerk in office organizes that, as I said, gives sense to reality, consults the intellect. Intellect says, hold your ground, don't run. It sends it to the mind, and then the mind sends that mail to the organs of action, to the hands and to the feet, And guess what the hands and feet do? They don't move because you're holding your ground. Understand? Okay. Now, let's do another analysis between the two. Okay, so the intellect is your discriminating faculty. Whenever you discriminate what should I do or not do, or what's the best approach in order to create the most harmonious situation in terms of what I'm what's confronting me, that's the job of the intellect. The job of the intellect is to calculate what's the best course of action, how, when, strategy, analysis, evaluation. Okay, it examines and judges the stimuli which it receives by the mind. Of course, the mind then receives it, from the sense organs, as we discussed. You understand that? Sense organs, mind, intellect. That's what we have here. Examines and judges the stimuli and communicates that decision to the mind. That's what we'll be speaking about. All right. The mind is that which receives the external stimulus, including this experience now of this room, through the 5 organs of knowledge, or via sense organs, very simple. And it communicates the response, in other words, what to do, how to act in the world, through 5 organs of action. You don't ever do an action without moving your hands, do you? Whenever you apply, you're always moving your feet, your hands, your mouth to speak. It's always activated. That's the mind. The mind's always sending signals to these 5 organs of action: speech, hands, sex, feet, and anus. Okay, and then the mind also arranges the sense input data, as I said, from the external stimuli. Okay, now we're clear what the difference is? All right. Now, let's do another analysis of what the mind is. The mind, very simple, is a seat of emotions. It's the feeler of emotions. Whenever you feel joyful or just excited or happy or not so positive or positive, pleasant, unpleasant, whatever that is, that's the faculty of the mind. That's the job of the mind. It's the feeler of emotions, like mercy, kindness, but also of the opposite end of the spectrum, jealousy, envy, pity, and so on. And the intellect is the one that entertains ideas or ideologies like freedom, liberty, nobility, political views, social orders, and mathematics. Yeah, you can see the difference there. This one, of course, involves a lot of analysis and calculating and so on. So those who are calculating a lot in their heads constantly, they're mostly identified with their intellect. Those who are constantly all in their heart, all about singing and expression and devotion, they're mostly in their mind. Yeah. So our job is to balance, so they're not disbalanced. Because for discrimination, they need to be balanced. Yeah. And what do I mean they need to be balanced? Is that if one's too much stuck in the head, what's going to happen is they're going to take all of this and going to think it's too intellectual. They're going to try to think what consciousness is. Think what Atman is. You cannot think it. Because remember, Atman, that inner circle, pervades all the others. Intellect cannot reach the bliss sheath cannot reach consciousness. You cannot know consciousness because that requires the intellect, doesn't it? Yeah. Or stuck in the heart, or stuck in the, in the mind, emotional, then how is one supposed to contemplate or discriminate if they're just all about feelings? They're not interested in this stuff, in this intellectual. They're going to call this too intellectual. Yeah. That's why we need to be balanced before we come to Vedanta. That's why Vedanta doesn't work for everyone. You need to be already done quite a bit of work on yourself to come into an equilibrious state. So you don't think it's too emotional, you don't think it's too intellectual. Otherwise, people walk out and they just totally miss the teaching. Okay, number 4 is the mind is limited to the known. Remember, mind is one step less pervasive than the intellect. Now, the mind is limited to the known. Like what? What's known? Memories. The mind, see, memories is known. You know about your memories. Does prana know about your memories? No. Does your body know about your memories? No. You see, so the more we go inside the circle, the more it gets pervasive. Body cannot go to your memories. Prana cannot go to your memories. Manomaya-kosha, your mental sheath, can go to your memories because it's known. But it cannot reach the unknown. Only the intellect can penetrate those areas which are unknown. What does unknown mean? Something that hasn't been created before. Taking something and creating something else without any prior experience. It's called creativity. That's why in a certain age in our history we were stuck with a certain like medieval age in Europe. We didn't move forward. Why? Because we weren't using our intellects. We were only focused on the known. In fact, there was a huge, religious revolution in those times. Prayers and Catholic, and it's all spread all over. But the intellect wasn't used. So there was no progression of advancement of technology and improvement of the world. Why? Because there was no faculty to tap into the unknown. There was no faculty to tap into creative potential, which you need the mind for. You see? So as we go more inside the circle, intellectual sheath, vijnana maya kosha, is even more pervasive than the manomaya kosha. It penetrates to the unknown realms, hence can acquire new knowledge, which then feeds this knowledge to the known. That means everything that is known is only known because it was fed by the intellect. Very simple. One example is the mind is like, so the intellect is like the military government who conquers new lands. It just conquers new lands. But then the mental sheath is like the civil government who consolidates the conquerings, who creates institutions for those lands that has been conquered. So it needs to offload the conquering to the intellect, and then once it's been conquered by the intellect, then it takes ownership of that, and then it becomes known. It becomes a familiar conquest. Yeah. Okay, now the very important one, this is going to carry over to the next week, because we need to understand something about the mind, which is the doubter. That doubt, we all recognize the doubter in us. Whether it's doubt of who I am, have I really gotten this knowledge? Is this really working? Am I in the right place? All of these doubts belong to the mind. So let's talk about doubts. Doubt, due to constant state of flux of the mind, there is doubt. What this means is, remember what I said about the subtle body? It's like a sheath. It's like a pure reflective mirror. Whenever a thought comes onto that mirror, that thought now has to get processed by the intellect. Understand? But what happens if the intellect has no previous experience of how to handle that situation? Yeah, you know those times when we were younger, we couldn't ask a girl out or a guy out? We were doubting. Why? Because the intellect was consulted, but there was no prior experience in the intellect as to how to handle the situation. So we just hesitated. We doubted. So that means as long as the intellect remains uneducated about reality, doubt about who you are continues. Important point. That's why we need to be educated. That's what Vedanta is. Educating your intellect. It's not educating your mind, because the mind's purpose is to receive the sense data. The intellect's purpose is to take that sense data and know how to process it and what it means in the light of what reality is, according to what the rishis have discovered. Okay, so the mind, due to constant state of flux, is the doubter. Now the intellect, as soon as there is a willed judgment or a decision, like I will, you know that decision, I will. Instantly what happens is that doubt now transforms into intellect. And that doubt dissipates. Very common in business. I don't know which way to go. What's the best deal? Should I go into this deal or not? That's the mind. There's doubt there. And then what happens when people talk about, usually social situations, some, not always, they'll talk about their doubts. I'm not sure, should I marry him, marry her? I don't know, what should I do? That's the mind remaining in doubt. And then what do? They consult their friends for what? Knowledge, advice. Why? To remove the doubt. Because why? The doubt is agitation. And we all identify with what? Freedom of agitation. So then we go and consult the wrong people sometimes, all in the name of just removing that doubt. Okay, so that means when the intellect comes and there's a decision, then that doubt becomes certainty or confidence. Example, should I kiss her? Should I kiss him? Should I go on a date? Should I not go on a date? There's some of agitation about that, isn't there? There's like, I don't know, should I or shouldn't I? And then the intellect finally makes a decision and says, you should do it, or no, don't. This is not a good idea. You're not ready. You got more stuff in your life. What happens? You get a relief. There's a sense of relief. That's the intellect. All right. Now, as I said at the beginning, the mind and intellect are not separate. Okay, this is an important point. In Vedanta, we use them interchangeably. Sometimes I'll say the mind, sometimes I'll say the intellect. When I say one or the other, don't think I'm just referring to the intellect or just referring to the mind. I'm referring to the mind and intellect at the same time. Because there is no thought without an emotion attached to it, and there is no emotion without a supporting thought to make sense of that emotion. You understand? So they're one and the same. All right, so now let's move on. Let's do a revision of everything we've now discussed. And then the next week, we're going to go in much detail about the three bodies. So the 5 sheaths and the self. Let's do a revision. Food sheath, annamaya kosha. Repeat. Annamaya kosha.
Annamaya kosha.
Vital air sheath. Repeat. Pranamaya kosha.
Pranamaya kosha.
Mental sheath. Repeat. Manomaya kosha.
Manomaya kosha.
Intellectual sheath. Repeat. Vijnanamaya kosha.
Vijnanamaya kosha.
Bliss sheath. Repeat. Anandamaya kosha.
Anandamaya kosha.
And Om is Atman. Okay, in this context, so far I've started using the word Atman only in the last session, or maybe a session before. Before I've used the word consciousness, Brahman, self, awareness, existence. Just putting this very clear, they're all synonymous words in class. Okay, the reason I'm interchanging them is so that next time you read a Vedanta book, or a different teaching, you're not confused. You go, oh, Andre didn't mention this. Just letting you, they're all synonymous words. Yeah. So now we're using the word Atman for the innermost part of the circle. So what is Atman? Atman is, you could call it a simple life principle that gives sentiency to what is inherently insentient. If you have matter, just pure matter. What's matter without being infused, without some principle which animates it? Some principle which gives it sentiency. That's why we can have a person who passes away in hospital, dead, nothing. Consciousness not pervading. And then they come back to life, the heart. Consciousness comes back in. What happens? Instant aliveness. They smile, they can think, they can remember. Why? Because you need consciousness, Atman, to access the 5 koshas, pañca-kośas. In this case, the person wakes up from death, they're being re-alivened, and suddenly that consciousness is aware of what? aware of the intellectual sheath, annamaya kosha. Therefore goes, this is a hospital. Aware of the manomaya kosha. I feel alive. Aware of the vital air. I'm working, I'm functioning, I'm here. Aware of its body. Body. As soon as Atman pervades what is inherently insentient, it becomes sentient. So what does this mean in regards to you as a person right now? Let's do a little experiment. Let's take any body here, any body, and we'll put them in the center of the room. And we're going to cause the heart to stop. Okay? Question. Have you died? Or has the body died? Okay, why is the body not functioning anymore?
The Pranamaya has ceased.
That's right. Yeah. So the body has ceased working because the faculty which causes the whole body to work has been stopped. So even though consciousness is still pervading the body, remember consciousness is everything, there is nothing but consciousness here. Even though consciousness is everywhere, everything is consciousness, still pervading that body, because that body is not working, there is no experience. So I'm going to ask you a question. What is life then? What does it mean to be alive right now? We are all alive. What does it mean to be alive?
Experience.
Good. Okay, let's use an antonym, an opposite. To answer that, what does death mean? What does it mean to be death?
If you can no longer sense or act.
Good. Good. The senses have ceased. Therefore, total cessation of experience is called death. In death, total cessation of experience. Why? We just said, the body has been stopped. The heart has been stopped. Nothing's moving anymore. Even though consciousness still pervades it, the senses are not working, the heart's not working, nothing's working. Even though you, consciousness, still pervade that body, there is now no experience because the body has been stopped. You haven't died. You, consciousness, haven't died. The body has stopped, therefore there's no experience. Now, what happens when a doctor comes over and gives it CPR? The body awakens. What happens instantly? Instantly experience starts. Huh? I'm alive. Instantly experience starts. Why? Because you just made those faculties work again. In other words, for experience to be identified, you need a mechanism called your body, mind, intellect complex, called your 5 koshas. That is why a human being is able to experience, and a rock cannot experience. Why? Because a rock has a food sheath, you could say, has a gross body, but it has no subtle body. Therefore, even though consciousness pervades a rock, there is no subtle body in the rock to reflect its experience or sense organs to identify the surface of the ground against the rock to report that experience. Therefore, the rock, we say, is insentient. You add a subtle body to the rock, and you add the 5 senses to the rock, and you add the causal body to the rock, that's a human being. What's the difference? The only faculty which makes you as a person, you, is these 5 koshas. You remove the 5 koshas, what happened? The 5 koshas are removed, but you're not removed. So I'm going to ask you a question now. Do you have any problem identifying, confusing yourself with this remote control? No. Do you have any problems or confusing yourself with this piece of paper? Do you have any problems confusing yourself with this body? No, with Andre's body? No. Okay, so you say, I'm definitely not Andre. Do you have any issues or problems confusing yourself with that body?
Absolutely.
Why is that? Okay. What's the difference between this object and, I'm going to objectify your bodies now because we've got to start speaking in a way to identify the bodies, not you. What's the difference between this remote control, or let's say this flower, because this is a little man-made, so it's a little bit complicated. This is organic, it comes from earth. What's the difference between this flower and your body?
Subtle bodies don't penetrate that.
Good.
Just this.
What is this flower made out of? 5 elements. What's your body made out of? So then if this is made out of 5 elements, and you say this is not you, and your body is made out of 5 elements, then why do you have trouble confusing 5 elements with yourself? If they're 5 elements, they're not you.
It's consciousness, isn't it?
So the question is, how do we get rid of this confusion that I am the body? One very simple way is to just simply say, okay, do you know about this flower right now? What I said at the beginning, the personal pronoun I qualifies an object. My flower, my body, my experience, my confusion, my lack of knowledge, my ignorance. Why do you separate them? Why don't you speak like this? Ignorance thinks that this world is beautiful. Beauty thinks that this world is just like that my wife or husband is amazing. Why don't you speak like that? Why do you start your sentences with my? And then you follow an object. Why do you go my and then followed by an object? Huh?
Touching.
Conditioning.
Are
Are you extending your action from your hands and your feet to your acting through this thing as well?
Okay, that's one way to put it. Yeah. Okay, but let's take it this way. Why don't you just since your body, why don't you speak as the body? Why don't you say body? This body is just totally, confused now. This body is just happy. Why don't you speak like that? If you're the body, why do you include the word mind there?
It's an object.
You inherently objectify every experience because you inherently understand who you already are. But because due to the lack of viveka, discrimination, not inquiring into this phenomena, we just take it for granted. And we mistaken that my for the body. But that my that you say, when you say I, my, that's not referring to your body. That is referring to awareness, existence. Why? How do we prove this? Because, like I said, are you aware of this flower? Are you aware of your arm? Are you aware of your 2 legs? Are you aware of your torso, your throat, your head? So now, which part, when you say I am the body, which part are you referring to? Are you talking about your arm? When you say I'm my body? Are you talking about your 2 legs? Which part are you referring to when you say I am my body? I need to know. Are you referring to the throat or the head? See, we haven't even invested. We think we're the body, but we don't even know which part of the body we're referring to when we say we're the body. So now, how can you be your body if you're aware of your body? How can a flower know itself? Can the body know itself? No, because if you were your body, you would know nothing about but your body. You would not know anything beyond the envelope of this body. But that's not true, is it? You know not only your body, but you know everything else that's happening around us. That means you can't be your body. Why? Because you're not only aware of your body, but you're also aware of everything else that's happening. So that means the reason why we confuse I with the body is because the body has been there with us for the longest amount of time since we last remember, from the beginning. It's just like this. If you were born in a family and the family told you to wear a bracelet as a baby, they put on a bracelet as a baby, you would not know the difference between that bracelet, 50, 30, 40, you would think that bracelet is you. Because it has been there for so long. You see that what the problem is? We've been with this body for so long, therefore we naturally confuse I am this body because we're so identified with it. That's the problem. So what does this all mean to conclude? Disidentifying from the body, from the 5 koshas. That we will talk about how, supported by the 3 bodies taught in much detail, the gross body, the subtle body, and the causal body, so that when we discover how, we can slowly start to negate the 3 bodies or the 5 koshas, whichever teaching you like more, and stay with that teaching, and little by little, this I, who believes is the body, mind, intellect complex, starts to disidentify with it, and then you realize your true nature, which is ironic to say because you already know your true nature. As I said, you're aware of your body. You already know you're not the body. You're aware of your mind, your thoughts. You already know that you're not your mind and your thoughts. And yet paradoxically, we believe we're the mind and the thoughts. So we're going to remove that, and we will get into that next session. Okay. Sarve bhavantu sukhinaha, sarve santu niramaya, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet. Om shanti shanti shanti. May all be happy. May all be free from illness. May all behold good things. May no one suffer.